Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Karen Jackson, and I'm so happy to be able to share with you this information about WeVideo and podcasting. I love podcasting because it brings a sense of intimacy and storytelling. And so when I learned that WeVideo was adding a podcasting component, I was very excited. Truth be told, I was already using it for my storytelling playlist on YouTube, but I had to hack it a bit. I used a black background screen and I just put the title of the book across the screen as I narrated the book. And at that time, YouTube didn't accept audio files, only video files to create a playlist. And so that's why I used the video portion of WeVideo to make my black screen podcast. So thank goodness I don't have to do that again. And you can upload your videos to YouTube now and call them podcasts. And you can also have audio files. I am so glad that they have invited me to speak with you. Simplifies the operative word, simple, because WeVideo is a clean interface. It's not complicated as some other video editors are. And there's basically three areas: a place where you put your clips, a place where you can watch your clips, and a place where you can edit your clips. And pretty much that's the main areas of the screen. There's no hidden menus or anything like that. So I think you're going to love it. I've been using WeVideo since 2014, and it has always been a very easy process because when you're finished with your video, they do all the work. Their servers will create the actual video for you, flatten it all out, and make it a MP3 or MP4, whatever kind of file that you need. And then they send you a happy little email when they're finished, and it says, hey, your video's ready. So you don't have to sit there and stare at your screen. You can do other things. So anyway, let's get started, as they say in the video world, and let's talk about creating a podcast. Now, I want to give you a little bit of facts, a little bit of data, just to kind of put into perspective how important podcasting is to many people and how many people are doing it. So yes, it's a thing. As a matter of fact, there are conventions about podcasting. I went to Podcast Evolutions in March in Los Angeles. It was very cool. Lots of people in love with podcasting and in love with being able to speak and say what they want to say, and all kinds of podcasts are out there. And we'll talk about what kind of a format that you might want to try. So anyway, there are currently over 95 million episodes. So not just whole podcasts, but episodes. And that's according to the podcasthost.com. And I put the link in there because if you're interested in seeing how much podcasting has grown over the years, it did take a little dip, of course, during COVID, but after COVID, it has increased about 18% every year, the number and types of podcasts out there. So, yes, it's a thing, and I think you're going to really enjoy it. All right, so there are a couple things, four things that I want to go over at this moment and just kind of share with you why I podcast and what's important about it. One thing I want you to know is that there's an intimacy and an honesty with the spoken word. When you add visuals, they can sometimes become a distraction. And I'm sure if you've ever tried to teach with video before, sometimes students get distracted with finding the exact right picture or the exact right color. And sometimes if you're making your own, if you're like me, you chase rabbits occasionally looking for the perfect matching whatever to go with a video or a theme or something like that. The beauty of the spoken word for me is that the message comes through and it's the basis of communication, not whether your graphics are cool or timed well. Number two, safety. Many people don't mind their voice being heard, but they don't want their face being seen. So if you're in a classroom situation and you don't want to record, or perhaps families don't want their children's faces recorded, then audio might be the way to go. Then also, number three, from a pragmatic point of view, an MP3 audio file is usually smaller, depending upon how long it is, than an MP4 video file. And if you have a limited amount of bandwidth or space that you need to keep an eye on, then perhaps MP3s are a way to go for you. And finally, I believe audio storytelling connects us with our childhood. And before we could even understand text or understand visible things, we learn to hear before we speak. And so many times stories are a way that we connect with the things that we know on a deeper level. And that's why I really enjoy podcasts. And I think you will too. All right, so now getting started with WeVideo is a simple process where you set up your account, you log in, you navigate to the WeVideo dashboard, you create your project, and then you can examine the project settings and formats. And there are also beginner sessions in this PD Palooza 2024 as well. So but this main slide, I want to encourage you to check out the WeVideo Academy. So it's wevideo.com/academy. I'm sorry the link looks kind of goofy there under the title. But there are videos, how-to videos that are very good visual demonstrations of how to get your video started and saved and sharing. I'll show you a few screenshots later on, but these are great examples of how to do things. And so here, that's a resource for getting more training. Okay, so planning your podcast is something that let's really get into it now. In this, remember, this is something that the way I teach it, and you are going to determine and figure out your own style and what works for you. And that all starts with, maybe this is your camera and your microphone right here, your phone, which is fine. Many podcasts are done with the phone and with or without a tripod. So a phone and a tripod may be where you're starting out, and that's perfectly fine, because the more you do it, the better you'll get, and you'll figure out what works for you. So in the planning process, I'm going to share exactly how I do it. And even I tend to change from time to time. If I have some wild ideas or something like that, I want to try something new. So first, let's just start with the big picture. Get your content planned. You choose your topic. You can and decide how you want to structure your podcast. So there are several ways to structure a podcast. It can be a talking head kind of situation that I'm here. You just open up your podcast and you just show yourself talking, and you just let her fly. Oops. You just let her fly. But you may have a conversation, which may be with a person in the room with you, or maybe someone else in a different place where you use some kind of screen sharing software. It all depends on how comfortable you feel with the technology, and even then you may not feel comfortable with it, but you can learn and try it and practice. And remember, you can practice 1,000 times and your camera never gets tired of filming you. over and over and over again. So you structure your podcast. If you want to start at the basics, think about how you tell a story. You tell them, this is what I always learned giving a speech and writing a story, etc. Tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, and then you tell them what you just told them. And if you want to, have 3 points in the middle when you're doing the telling. And that has always, it's a good starting place. Now, writing teachers are going to know that you have to have a hook, and you have to set up and describe somehow you have to set your protagonist in the setting, and that's all part of the screenwriting. So yes, write a script. So I started, and you may notice me turning the page, but I started writing my script, and I just let the ideas flow. And then when I get ready, then I sit down and write out, and it's good for me to have that flow. But also, I use my computer, and I highlight things that are important and things that I want to make sure. Then I usually do a slide deck, and I reorder and order and change things around, and then I have it ready. So if I'm going to be doing an instructional podcast, I'll use the slide deck as a visual aid, but I may just do it for my own planning. And so depending upon what you want your student, if you're teaching this, what you want your students to do, you may want them to write out a script and then not necessarily read it, but at least have an idea of what they're going to talk about. So that, for me, that's the best way to get the ideas out in a coherent way. Also, I have 3 pieces of paper taped to the wall behind my monitor. So I have notes there, I have my book, and then this other outline I used in a couple days ago as I was getting my thoughts together. So structure your podcast how you feel comfortable. Write your script tips, and think about the equipment that you need. The basics is a camera and a microphone. That's all you need. And you take that and you put that into WeVideo, and you save it and share it, and boom. It's better to get it done and start now, refine later, than just to wait and practice and get the clips right and get everything all edited, all pretty and everything, and it'll take you forever, and you won't get to iterate and change it. So if you start small, start now. It's going to be ugly, it's not going to be perfect, but the more you do it, the better you get. And that's always a good thing to remember. Your recording environment set up. I have all my junk pushed to the sides, so hopefully you can just see the 3 pictures on the wall behind me. This is our office / guest room. So we also use it as an extra closet. So I'm not going to show you, but I have clothes hanging, and I have my crafting supplies over here on the left. And I love this room because it's kind of away from everywhere else. Things that your environment that you may that may sneak up on you that you didn't think about. Think about squeaky chairs. I'm standing up because my office chair is very squeaky. So I'm not sitting down. I'm standing up and talking to the camera here. I practiced with the camera and the microphone many times before I actually started. And this is the microphone that is working for me. It was not very expensive, but it has about a 6-foot cord that hooks into my computer. So I'm using my computer and a mic, and then I'm recording with WeVideo. Let's see. And your environment, things like fans and things like washing machines and things like people, your neighbors had getting a new roof, which mine were the day before yesterday. So there was hammers and lots of hammering going on. So think about that when you have your environment. I have a little sign taped to my door on the outside. It says recording. And so my family knows that mom's doing her thing, and don't come in the door. Um, so those are the tips. That's the content and the technical planning that you can go through. And I think it'd be very helpful to think about, try to look at your environment and think about what could be uh, in your way, and get those things out of your way so that you can just get after it and do it. Sound, I think the hierarchy of important things is sound. Sound is the most important thing. If you have a great looking, if you're doing a video podcast, if you have a great looking podcast, but nobody can hear what you're saying, or there's a distracting little click or something, then your story won't get through. Your thoughts, your ideas won't get through. If it's an audio, I mean, really, if it's an audio podcast and your mic's not working or it's not loud enough, then that's not good either. So make sure you have sound first, and then if you're going to use video, get your video ready. If you have any questions, put them in the chat, and I hope to be during the session in there answering questions, by the way, and asking some questions perhaps. All right, on to the next slide. Okay, so now I'm going to make a couple suggestions that I learned at the podcast convention. And this was from a very experienced podcaster. And he was talking about soundproof rooms. And he was talking about how important it was to take all the distracting sounds away from your message. And the way he learned, and I've heard this actually twice before, you see this quilt? What you do if you're doing an audio podcast is you put this over your head and then over the microphone. So since my microphone is right here, if I wanted to, I am serious, y'all. I am serious. That this makes your voice sound so rich and so, dare I say, intimate, that you can't hear any distractions, and it's just focusing on the voice. So it's quiet and there's no echoes, and it makes a great podcast. So, and plus, if you're like me and you get distracted by all the things that you're looking at around you, then it's just you in your own little world telling your story. And if you have students, get a large box and set it on its side and cut the bottom out so that there is box above and on the sides. And if you really want students to be focused on their voice and telling their story, then you can have them also put a little blanket or a towel over the back. And also it gives them a little bit of privacy. They're not so self-conscious. So, for what it's worth, those are tips from professionals and people that have been doing podcasts for a very long time. Anyway, so there you go. On to the next one. All right. So stories are about connecting to emotion. You want your listeners to feel something. You want your listeners to feel joy, longing, sadness, excitement, awe, wonder, fear, suspense. So if you're going to do a true crime podcast, you want them to feel what the protagonist is feeling. And So in the big picture of what your podcast format's going to be, focus on one or two emotions that you want them to feel in that short span of time. So in your plan, you'll know that you'll have about 10 minutes to 30 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 hours. I mean, I've listened to podcasts that are 2 hours long, y'all. To me, that's too long, but it was fascinating because they were able to cover top to bottom all kinds of information. It was a health podcast. So I loved it. But also my podcast, Stories on a Train, tends to be very short, maybe 5 minutes, 6 minutes. Um, and I've been part of another one called Chat with Sandy and Karen, where we spent about an hour talking about educational things, just in an informal chat. So those are some ways, maybe. So we wanted, let's say, my stories on a train. I want people to feel curiosity, and I want them to think of maybe longing, like maybe they could ride a train one day, or sadness, like they maybe reminiscing, they could remember some stories they had. So those are the emotions. Focus on the emotions that you want your listener to feel. All right, and so when you start writing the script, I want you to focus on, yes, what you want them to feel, but how can your story weave through, or your ideas weave through and perhaps come around circle. So keep them coming back for more. So if you have a part one episode, then you can remind them at the end, well, if you want to learn more, come back for part two, and break your story up. So, one of the ways is to keep people coming back for more is to have a thread perhaps running through your episodes or your stories. Think of each episode as a little island. I like to call this kind of writing archipelago writing. And think of islands that are close to each other, they're related, they're episodes, perhaps episodes in a story. And you can have that all in the same episode, but they're events. It's better to say they're events that happen in a story that happen in a particular order. And I think the reason why I like archipelago is that they're related. The islands are related in an archipelago. It's an arc. It's usually some kind of think of it as a story arc. And each little, like if you want to create a graphic for your students, maybe it would be one island leads to the next island, leads to the next island, so that they are related, especially if you're going to do a serial or a true crime or a day in the life of kind of podcast. So any kind of writing like that connects to the last one is always good, and it helps the listener make sense of the story. So some of the benefits is the organization, the clear framework, which is easy to learn and to follow. Focus, concentrate on developing each part. That way you can focus and add the nuance that you want for each little island. And transitions, you can do transitions that are similar so that it's something, it may be an audio, a sound that comes up after each little transition from one thought or one idea to the next one. I use train sounds on my train podcast because I like the thread of that through the idea of talking to someone on a train. And then engagement, introducing new elements, then bring the beginning back around full circle. And so that helps your listener become engaged. Okay, this part of the presentation changes a little bit because I wanted to give you an example of a podcast that could possibly happen. And it has two ideas and one question. The two ideas are: when I was a little girl, I used to dream of Antarctica, and I loved the conversation I had with my dad once. I remember it very vividly. And what are you thinking about was the question that sparked me. So I was thinking that when you ask someone what they're thinking about, that shows that you care, and it shows that you are interested in them as a person. And when you ask it in a nice and loving way, then it brings you closer to people. Anyway, so that's my little example. And then the last half of this presentation, I'm going to play 4 different videos for you. Not videos, sorry. 4 different files for you, podcasts. One is just sound. One is sound with some sound effects. And another is just my voice. And another one is a fully flown video. Just to show you, you can get a different feel from the same information, the same script, 4 different ways, very short. So that's what the purpose of that's going to be. And I'm going to be narrating the slides from now on instead of recording a little speech over each one. So now we are identifying emotional elements that are important to you about your story. And I just picked some images here that might evoke some emotion about your, which you're going to talk in your podcast. I think you can see how a visual effect happens. Okay, so here's a picture of my script. I wanted to focus on a sense of nostalgia, wonder, and safety. So I bolded those kinds of words, things that were important to me in my script. So I want to either make sure to emphasize them in the actual podcast or as I read it this is the script I used for my sample podcast. And then I bolded those important words so that I can remember them and highlight important things. And it helps to be able to summarize what you want to say. And then you kind of know, and you can share that more clearly with your audience. So focusing on these highlighted words can spark ideas for future podcasts or help you to maintain a consistent theme. So you may have repeated words that are bolded, but that shows that you are consistent in your presentation. That's why I like using the script. And you might even use the highlighted words to distinguish multiple episodes. If something seems strong, then you can do another episode on that same topic. Okay, so what we're doing now, looking at the script, is we're evaluating, doing a sort of script analysis, looking for structure, themes, and characters. That's kind of like the little islands. And then storyboard is visually planning with either post-it notes or maybe even physically blocking out what's going to happen in the podcast, whatever helps you make sense of it in your mind and your students. So also, this brings us to the question, do your highlighted words lend themselves to video or audio or both? How are you going to tell this story? The benefits of video podcasts is that it's visually engaging. It allows for visual storytelling, making the content more with facial expressions, etc. Also, you increase your reach because platforms like YouTube have large audiences looking for video content. They even have a podcast section now. Potential to reach viewers who prefer video over audio. And also, you can split longer video podcasts into shorter ones for like shorts or TikTok or X tweets or whatever you want to do with it. And then also audio podcasts can be easily distributed across multiple platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, RSS feed, etc. Their audio are generally simpler and less costly to produce than video, and they're good for background listening. Like you can pull weeds in your yard and listen to a podcast if you want. And then combined benefits, offering both audio and video, can cater to a wider audience. And I've included a link here to a nice article about that. Lots of benefits of having both. The flexibility and for users to choose their preferred format, and then video content on like YouTube can improve search engine availability. Now, WeVideo Media Library is great because it has both audio and visual kinds of clips. Your media is searchable. You can preview it and you can trim it in the editor. So these are great additions that make it so easy to create in WeVideo. All right, this is the slide that shows the audio only Dreaming of Antarctica audio podcast episode, and then also the video podcast with images, and then full-on video podcast with images and audio effects. I'm going to play those in a minute right after I get to the slide where we talk about how to share your podcast through WeVideo. You don't even have to have a YouTube channel. So you can share on social media with platforms like Facebook, X, and Instagram, because you just copy the link and then you put that link in, and it's a link to the gallery or the exports that are in WeVideo. So WeVideo will house it for you. You can use it and share to YouTube or save it in your drive, which is pretty cool. And now I'm going to attempt to play the podcast, the 4 different ones, and I'll introduce them. Okay, here we go. This is the podcast with audio only. Palooza 2024 script. Take 4. When I was a little girl, I used to dream of Antarctica, one of my fondest memories of my childhood. One summer night, I remember I snuggled with my dad in our backyard hammock when I was 8 years old. We talked about lots of things, but I remember asking him this. "What are you thinking, Dad?" "I'm looking at the stars and the planes going by, imagining I'm up there over the city. The sky is dark and the stars sparkle. So do the buildings, cars, and the streetlights below." Then we were silent for a while in the cool, cool air, just the sounds of evening crickets around us. "What are you thinking?" "Oh, I'm thinking of Antarctica," I said. "We learned at school that thousands of penguins live there, all different kinds. They have glaciers and rivers of ice. There are also giant snowbanks that look like canyons, and the wind blows really hard. Big chunks of ice fall into the ocean and float away as big as islands. Okay, this next one is a recording of a visual of the script itself and then me reading the script. I thought this might be useful as a read along. Palooza 2024 script. Take 4. When I was a little girl, I used to dream of Antarctica, one of my fondest memories of my childhood. One summer night, I remember I snuggled with my dad in our backyard hammock when I was 8 years old. We talked about lots of things, but I remember asking him this: "What are you thinking, Dad?" "I'm looking at the stars and the planes going by, imagining I'm up there over the city. The sky is dark and the stars sparkle. So do the buildings, cars, and the streetlights below." Then we were silent for a while in the cool, cool air, just the sounds of evening crickets around us. "What are you thinking?" "Oh, I'm thinking of Antarctica," I said. "We learned at school that thousands of penguins live there, all different kinds. They have glaciers and rivers of ice. There are also giant snowbanks that look like canyons, and the wind blows really hard. Big chunks of ice fall into the ocean and float away as big as islands." Okay, this is the video podcast example that has just video and the same script that's been read before. Notice the difference. Palooza 2024 script. Take 4. When I was a little girl, I used to dream of Antarctica, one of my fondest memories of my childhood. One summer night, I remember I snuggled with my dad in our backyard hammock when I was 8 years old. We talked about lots of things, but I remember asking him this: "What are you thinking, Dad?" "I'm looking at the stars and the planes going by, imagining I'm up there over the city. The sky is dark and the stars sparkle. So do the buildings, cars, and the streetlights below." Then we were silent for a while in the cool, cool air, just the sounds of evening crickets around us. "What are you thinking?" "Oh, I'm thinking of Antarctica," I said. "We learned at school that thousands of penguins live there, all different kinds. They have glaciers and rivers of ice. There are also giant snowbanks that look like canyons, and the wind blows really hard. Big chunks of ice fall into the ocean and float away as big as islands." All right, and here is the same script with audio and visual support, and I think you'll see that for me, it portrays much more emotion and story. Hope you enjoy it. Palooza 2024 script. Take 4. When I was a little girl, I used to dream of Antarctica, one of my fondest memories of my childhood. One summer night, I remember I snuggled with my dad in our backyard hammock when I was 8 years old. We talked about lots of things, but I remember asking him this: "What are you thinking, Dad?" "I'm looking at the stars and the planes going by, imagining I'm up there over the city. The sky is dark and the stars sparkle. So do the buildings, cars, and the streetlights below." Then we were silent for a while in the cool, cool air, just the sounds of evening crickets around us. "What are you thinking?" "Oh, I'm thinking of Antarctica," I said. "We learned at school that thousands of penguins live there, all different kinds. They have glaciers and rivers of ice. There are also giant snowbanks that look like canyons, and the wind blows really hard. Big chunks of ice fall into the ocean and float away as big as islands." I wanted to thank you so much for sharing this time with me, and I hope that you contact me and let me know what your podcast is and what you thought of this presentation. And enjoy the rest of the Palooza. I do have a couple podcasts if you want to check them out. One's a conversation and one is a storytelling. The storytelling is kind of a relaunch this year. So I hope you enjoy it. And thank you again for coming. If you want the link for this presentation, it's a tinyurl.com/YCX2RTFH. And there's my email, and my name is Karen Jackson. And thank you so much, and please enjoy using WeVideo. Bye-bye.